Well, welcome to the very first lesson of the Focus on Agility CMS course. I am Marcelo Lewin, the Headless Creator. As always, get a hold of me right there, marcelo@headlesscreator.com. Send me questions, comments, whatever you like. We'll get back to you as soon as I can. Today, my guest presenter is Joe Varty. He's the CTO of Agility, and he's going to show us how to create an evergreen content model. That means that it's a content model that will outlast all your website redesigns, which you know you will do. We're going to get into the architecture. We're going to get into all the ins and outs in Agility CMS. But before we do that, I'm going to invite Joel, and we're just going to have a conversation with him. Joel, welcome.
Hi, Marcelo. It's great to be here.
I'm glad you're here. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. Where are you located?
I'm located in a small town of Port Hope, just east of Toronto in Ontario, Canada.
Okay, cool. In Ontario. So is that Agility is based there?
That's right.
Nice. Are you originally from Canada or?
That's right. I grew up on a dairy farm not too far from here. So
Nice.
I'm a farm boy.
Oh, cool. Well, how did you get it from farm boy to founder of a company, a technology company? Tell us real quick about how you got that.
Yeah, super quick. I played sports, but that led me to university. And in university, I discovered that I loved computers, and I've been doing that ever since, and just love building websites and helping other people build websites.
Let me guess, hockey you played?
Played football. Oh,
man, there goes that stereotype of Canadians playing hockey, right? Always. That's funny. So, what made you get into technology? I mean, you said you loved it, but how young were you when you got into technology, and what attracted you to that?
It's just the creating something. So that I know, yeah. I'm pretty sure every person who's developed written code, you get that thing where you write some code, you run it, and it does something visually on your screen. Always loved that about programming. And then when I got into web development, it just sort of went to a whole new level because there's just so much you can do visually. And I've been, fortunate enough programming since the 90s to come through and see a lot of evolutions of the web. And we're just
Right.
a magical era of what browsers can do. Love to be in part of all this.
What did you program in the 90s? What language?
Well, started off in C, C#, C++,
Okay.
Java, lots of Java, and then discovered C# and .NET, and now lots of JavaScript and TypeScript, of course.
Of course. Yeah, definitely. Cool. Now, I end all my interviews with something personal. I didn't tell you this. I forgot to tell you this, but it's okay. I'd like to find out, as you can tell, I'm a movie geek. So I love watching movies all the time. I need to know, what's your favorite movie or TV show, if you have either?
My favorite movie, probably Lord of the Rings.
Okay. The entire trilogy or a specific one?
Yeah, no, definitely the trilogy, like The Fellowship, Two Towers, Return of the King trilogy. Absolutely.
Okay. I tried getting through those. I couldn't do it. My wife loves them. I just couldn't get through them. I don't know. Not mine, but it's okay. As you can tell, I like these very dumb kind of comedies.
Awesome.
That's me. All right. With that said, let's get started. I'm going to go ahead and show your screen here. We're starting with the slides here. So for those of you watching live, you have comments there. Go ahead and type in the comment bar any questions you have. I'll ask Joel. Joel, if I have questions, I'll jump in. It's all yours.
Thanks, Marcelo. Oh, this is great. Well, we're coming at this usually from a standpoint of, well, we need a new website, or we need a new app, or we need something to bring all our content into one place. Well, for that to work now and into the future, you need to create I'm calling this an evergreen content ecosystem. It's more than just an architecture. It's a way to set up your content so that it will work sort of as it all kind of lives together. And it's very organic because it's going to grow. And this is setting you up for the first iteration of it. And Agility CMS has specific tooling that will help you do this. And we'll take you through a step-by-step guide on how to implement this concept to really future-proof that content. And we're going to need to take 3 general steps when setting up this content ecosystem. So this is that step-by-step guide. So the first step is going to be share content. How do we bring together all the content that is, of course, shared? And it could be shared across multiple channels or websites. We're going to look at the modular types of content and what that means. And then we're going to actually look at sitemaps and pages. It's because that's really important as part of setting up, especially a website. So let's look at the shared content side of it. And the idea is every organization, including yours, has content that's valuable to it. It could be things like blog posts or press releases, employee bios, product listings, categories, audiences. It goes on and on. You could have a lot of shared content. And identifying that is really important. We want to go through everything in your organization where you have content that you think might be important for your online presence. Talk to your peers, talk to all the different folks in your departments to figure out what content is important to them. A general rule of thumb here is if it appears on your website and it might be managed by somebody, it needs to be in Agility CMS. But it's really important to note that we do not start from the design with this technique. We want to think in what we call a content first approach to shared content. This content is often going to live well beyond the scope of any design that we have. And it may end up being that something you're building a website now, but this content could actually work to go into other places. Maybe you'll use it for email templates or just other things. So you got to be a little forward thinking with looking at what is shared content.
And one thing, if you don't mind me jumping in real quick
Sure.
on the shared content portion, we always think of these delivery channels, but we also have internal delivery channels like system integrations that another system may be using this
Yes.
content, right? So to think a little broader, right? I always teach people when we're content modeling is don't think just about the web or your mobile app, but it could be your IoT device, or it could be Salesforce that needs some information to send to merge with customers, right?
Sure. Yeah, and I just kind of take it for granted. We're on Headless Creator. This is a headless, Agility CMS is a headless content system. So all of this content can be accessed through APIs, and it's decoupled from the website that it's initially intended for.
Yeah.
But I do want to note that sometimes you will find elements in your design as you go through your design that might reference lists of content that you haven't necessarily identified yet as shared, but it might look like, oh, I think this might be shared based on what it looks like in the design. So in those cases, you need to decide if that content needs to be shared or not. And that's an important decision to make. So once you've kind of figured out what those pieces of content will be in terms of like high level things, then we need to start structuring those content models. And Agility CMS allows us to model the content of our structure really easily. And each type of content is going to have its own model that we can implement as a list or as a single item. And that content model will contain all the fields that we need to describe an item of a particular type. So for example, a blog post model probably is going to contain things like title, URL, slug, image, date, category, tags, body, like a whole bunch of different fields. And they might seem really familiar to you if you've used something like WordPress. But you can add more of them if you need to. And you can also determine the types. So like if you have an image field, that's going to be an image attachment, allowing the user to pick from the asset sections. You kind of take it for granted, but we want to go through those motions. But Agility CMS also lets you create what's called linked content fields, and we'll see what that looks like in a second. But we're going to look at that as in terms of what's a content relationships. Okay, so we can link content to other pieces of content, so that, for instance, our category list, we can have a global list of categories, so you're not typing in things, higgledy-piggledy. Categories and tags work something like that. So we want to build a diagram before we actually get into Agility to show this. I always like to do this. Sometimes it's on a whiteboard. Sometimes it's in a tool like Visio, which I'm going to show in a second. So let's actually look at a diagram of what this is going to look like. So if we jump over to our other screen here, okay, this is a Visio diagram that I put together of a very simple content model that shows, kind of looks like a database model. If you're a developer, trust me, this isn't a database. This is just showing logical sort of relationships between 4 different kinds of content. So we have our post, like a blog post. As I said, it's got a title, URL slug, date, image, etc. But we've got an author field, and it's got an author ID field. And this is going to reference over to our author's content model, which has something like maybe a name, bio, image. Okay. So on their own, they're really simple, but when we start to link them together, they have a lot more, they add that relationship perspective into it. We look at our category field, which is linked with the category ID over to our categories model, right? So this is very kind of strongly typed relationships. And we've got our tags content, which is, we're going to show this as a list of checkboxes, whereas the author and the content were dropdowns. So we can pick multiple tags that are associated to this piece of content. And then we've got an HTML field that actually is our content. So now we've kind of diagrammed this out in Visio, and oftentimes there will be many, many pages of content that you've diagrammed out. And I'd like to look at it. Sometimes it's nice to sort of see it all in place in maybe one big Visio diagram, so you can get it all in your head before you start plugging it into Agility. But when you are ready, we go into Agility. So this is the
Quick
Agility.
question, if you can go back real
Oh,
quick.
sorry. Yeah, sure.
On the HTML, on the content, is that
Mhm.
stored actually on the back end as HTML, or is it stored as JSON, or do you have the ability to pick and choose? How does that work?
Good question.
I'm assuming that's a rich text field.
This is a rich text field.
Right.
Agility does have what's called a block editor as well. And it's kind of the age-old question of, do you like block editors versus rich text? So in this case, we're going to use the rich text field.
And that stores as HTML.
Stores it as plain old
Okay.
HTML. Yeah.
Okay,
If we
cool.
chose a block editor, it would store it as JSON.
As JSON, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. All right. So we've diagrammed out this content model. And we've kind of got it figured out what it's going to sort of be comprised of. Now let's jump into Agility in the Content Manager. And what I've done is actually I've created a trial, which you can do at agilitycms.com. Go through, create a starter using the blog. There's a blog starter. Okay. So by default, it's going to have a few models that are already set up for you. Okay. So we go into the models section, and I'm going to look at content models. Let's just pretend these don't exist right now, page models and page templates. We're just going to be looking at content models, and we're going to focus on the post content model. Let's take a look at it. So this already has a bunch of the things that we've figured out that we needed, right? Looking at jumping back to our diagram, URL, slug, title, date, image. We've got all of those in there, okay? We've got the blog category, and we've got the blog content, which is an HTML field, all right? All right, we've called this blog featured image. So the names are not quite exact. And what I would normally suggest is like try to keep them a little bit in sync if you can, so that your diagram can be a living document, so that you can refer back to it later, because you absolutely will want to. Some sites that I've worked on have been around for more than a decade, and the content model has a lot of decisions that were made. So that's why that diagram is important. And I would add notes and comments into there to sort of show, hey, this is why we decided to call this field such and such. But you notice on this one, we don't have a tags field and we don't have an author field, okay? And so those are actually going to relate to other content models themselves. So I'm going to go in and create those because we don't have an author in here yet. So I'm going to create an author content type, content model, I should say. And I'm going to add a field to it called title, or actually, no, it's name, I think. Excuse me. I think we're going to use the word name. We're going to do a name, a bio, and an image, okay? So name, we're going to make it a text field, super simple. I'm going to make it required. And so you've got a lot of options that you can pick from, and you might want to put that in your diagram as well. And your diagram will get more complicated as you say, hey, all the different things that you're going to make available. We're going to keep it simple right now. And we're going to add a bio field. It's not going to be required. We're going to make that multi-line text. Pretty simple. And one more, we're going to add an image. I'm not going to make it required. Interesting too is now that I can kind of think about it. If ever I'm going to show this data, I would need to know if it's going to be required or not, because you've seen where people list like bios. If the image isn't required, I probably need to have available, hey, check for null, and show like that grayed out sort of placeholder image. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're building your model, that it's going to affect how you should develop your website.
And I think that's something that people need to keep in mind, sort of content governance, right? But
Mhm.
beyond one place, so you may need it required in one place, but not in another.
Sure.
So I would always default on the required and then just don't use it where you don't need it, right?
Absolutely. And then, so now what we've done is we've created this model. We actually haven't created a list based on it yet. So right here, we're actually going to create a container for this. And this is where I said you can do it as a list or a single item. So we could set up, and I'll show you later, but in this content model, there's a single item that's like the header, the global header that we have for our website. But this is an author content, which is kind of like the schema, the model for it. Now we need to create an actual list of authors. All right, so I'm going to create a list, new content called authors. And I'm not going to restrict it to a single item because this is a list. So I'm going to click create. So now we've got our authors list all set up, so I can link to it from my post. And I just have one more thing I need to do. And I go really fast on this one because there's only one field. I'm going to create the tag model. And my tag model has only a title. I'm going to make that required. I'm going to make a text, add field, and then save that. And here we go. I'm going to create my tags list as well. So pretty simple. Once I've decided, once I've got it all diagrammed out and I know what I'm going to do, actually creating this in Agility is really easy, right? So I've created my tags list. Here we go. And now if I jump back to my post model, I can figure out what I need to do. So I'm going to need to add an author field, and I'm going to choose linked content for this. And I'm going to link it to a piece of content, and I'm going to link to a specific item from a list. So there's a bunch of kind of very specific agility features we're using here. I'm going to use a drop-down list to display this field. I'm going to pick from the authors list, right? And it just does it for me. So now I've linked this to my authors, and I need to do one more thing. I need to now link it to my tags. I'm going to create a field called tags. It's going to be linked content. And let's go ahead and link it to specific items in our list. I'm going to use the checkbox list just for fun. I could use a search list box. So there's two ways I can select many of these. All right. And I'm going to link this to, as I said, my tags list. Go ahead and do that. Save this model. So I already have a list of blog posts set up that's already using this post model. So I'm going to actually go ahead and click into there just to show what this looks like now. Okay. So if I'm creating a new blog post, I can see I've got my title, the fields that I already had before. I can choose from categories. All right. Now this isn't in the right order, so I probably want to change the order, but I have my author dropdown, which is linked to my authors list, and I can go ahead and create a new author if I want to, or I have my tags list, and I don't have any